Things about the Big Bang Theory. It has this idea that everything's expanding from one central point. And they use all this math and whatnot to figure out where that one point was. And then they have an idea of how it blew up or whatnot. But when you go back like that, they do all their math and they say this would make some sense. And then someone asks the question, well, what happened before the Big Bang? And they say, well, there's no way to measure that. And because there's no way to measure that, no one who's a Big Bang theorist will ever answer that question or ever even attempt to. Because there's no way to measure it. So, in the name of science...
there's actually some theories now where they're talking about having a reason for the Big Bang. And so they're talking about, none of this has been by any means confirmed, but at least they are talking about being able to measure. They talk about brains, and that our universe might be something of a hypersphere floating in a higher dimensional space, and two brains sort of collided to create the Big Bang. So they are asking that question now, but again, the question just goes back another step: how the brains get there? So we always sort of end up with this.
And those are membranes, like this.
Yeah, membranes, not a brain.
I knew you were saying that. But yeah, it goes to the point where if you can't measure it, you can't make assumptions on it, and that's where I stop. I think that's where most of us stop. Go ahead.
Going back to what she said about the God before God, wouldn't it be possible that if there was just one powerful God, that he could just create everything, and he essentially would get the free ride, but he did create everything, giving him the right to have the free ride? I have in front of me a law of the theory of entropy. You've probably heard of it.
Go ahead.
If you heard it, okay. It's using the second law of thermodynamics that states the amount of energy in a system that is available to do work is decreasing, and entropy increases as the available energy decreases. In other words, the purely natural tendency of things is to move towards chaos, not order, and available energy necessary for work is lost in the process. And eventually the universe will run down, and all life and motion will cease. And all things would eventually cease to function. And the first point is the universe is not infinitely old, like it has a start, because it has not run down yet. So that means it must have a beginning. Because the universe has had a beginning, it is not infinite in size. All events have a cause, going back to the first one. Since the universe is finite, like it's not limitless, it had a beginning, there cannot be an infinite number of regressions for the causes to bring into existence. There must be a single uncaused cause of the universe. Otherwise we had uncaused cause bringing into existence something greater than or equal to itself. Any cause that is natural to the universe is part of the universe. An uncaused cause cannot be natural part of the universe, which is finite.
Okay, I hear what you're saying.
There's more, but I mean, like the God of the Bible claims to in Psalm 92 that the God is God without beginning. So therefore,
yeah. Well, I think exactly what you're trying to say is it goes back to the law of causality. Anything that's created has to have a cause, and so if the universe was created, it'd have to have a cause, and if there's nothing there, then it couldn't have a cause. And God is the only uncaused cause because he wasn't created. Therefore, the law of causality doesn't apply to him. And so it's the only explanation for the creation of the universe.
Kate, you wanted to answer that?
Yeah, I did. Even if we say that there is an uncaused cause, there's no real reason to say that that's God. The word God has a lot of baggage. It has a personality, and it has moral baggage involved with him, and it seems much less likely that it would be something you would call God rather than something natural. Or it might be outside of what we know right now, but it would still be natural in some way.
But
what if that's how God is? That's just.
But outside of our universe, right?
What he's saying is that say this uncaused cause is a force immaterial. Alright, it's an immaterial force that isn't part of the physical realm, because everything in the physical realm has a cause and has an effect. And nothing outside can cause anything inside. Let's say that there was an immaterial uncaused cause. That doesn't give us enough to say that that immaterial force has consciousness or a personality or thoughts.
I would say I would agree, except for the assumption that something immaterial, like God, as you defined it, can't interfere with something material. Like, if I would totally agree if there was no evidence of something outside of this realm affecting this reality and this nature. You know what I mean? And that's where the claim would be.
What you're talking about, like the event you're talking about.
Excuse me?
I know what you're saying, but I don't know the event you're talking about. If you could explain it.
Oh, the evidence?
Yeah.
Of a God acting in this. Geez, well, kind of hard where to start, but I guess if somebody would hold, any part of the Bible to be true, then you would have a number of instances, or a personal encounter, or whatever. There's tons of stories that you could go back to of instances where God would have interacted here and revealed His nature and Himself here through prophets, through the Bible, through miracles, and then that's how we gain the ability to describe a nature to Him outside of, this.
Doesn't that kind of, to me that sounds like a little bit of circular logic, like you have to first assume there's a God to first acknowledge that those are miracles and like acts of God, and that the prophets aren't just like...
Well, I mean, it's got to be something if somebody predicts, a number, hundreds of events, and then all of those happen specifically to one person, thousands of years later, not thousands, 1,200, 1,400. I mean, it seems logical enough to assume that there's some type of, miracle there, and it's not just going to happen from chance.
And you'd have to assume yourself that there was no God to be able to assume that. Exactly what he said. You can't prove that there was no God.
Couldn't everybody in this room then make a prediction, and the one person who got it right is the prophet?
Yeah, well, definitely, but there's a difference between predicting the sun's going to come up tomorrow and predicting, there's a person who's going to be crucified, who's going to be born of a virgin, who's going to rise on the third day, who's da-da-da-da-da.
And there's numerous prophecies. We're not talking one or two.
And it's not just like scattered, it's all in one Bible, and
That's assuming that the story wasn't distorted in some way. Or
Assuming, but his historical accuracy.
Besides Mary and Joseph to say that it was, no one was there to prove that.
Even if the Paul's just one, even if you don't accept it.
We digress from the point of the meeting and getting into the historical accuracies or credibilities and other.
But even if you don't accept the timelines of it, the Jews were there before, and the Torah is still there. All the prophets from Isaiah and all before that, even if it was only 2 years, it was still called like hundreds of prophecies before. Maybe not hundreds, but specifically to Jesus. How many did you say? 40.
I think it was like 48. Anyway, sorry.
Alright, go ahead.
What do you think about like Nostradamus and like how he predict whatever in his, like some of his whatever he wrote, like he predicted 9/11 and like World War II and like all that kind of stuff where it was like coded, but then after it happened, you read it. I mean, what do you think about that and like having to do with prophecies and actually being like a meaning and like a higher power and all that?
I'm personally really skeptical on it, and I don't really know enough to really talk about it. I mean, you guys?
There are a lot of different ways. There are a lot of different ways to have a prediction come true. One way is to be very vague, which is 90% of all prophecies. Another is to say things that happen all the time anyway, like wars or towers falling, maybe, or
Uses,
something like that.
Hitler, like he almost uses Hitler's name though.
But he didn't
but
use
he
his
said
name.
his
Guess
name.
what? Wouldn't have that have been awesome if he would have used Hitler's name? Then we wouldn't be having this discussion.